Hello everyone, Phil here for KO Gaming, and welcome to the Hateful Truth Rebooted, where I give you maximum truth and minimum bullshit regarding the latest video game releases. The subject of today's review is near and dear to my heart, being that I have played the Street Fighter line of games for 25 years. Both on a casual and a professional level, I can see from both sides of the fence, and I really feel that going through this game and reviewing its positives and negatives are going to give you a unique take that other people may not be able to relay because they don't have the level of experience that I have. Street Fighter V has been one of the most dividing and controversial fighting game launches in history. And in this review, we're going to examine exactly why people of different audiences may like or dislike this game, and then I'm going to give you my overall thoughts. So here we go. So essentially, when you start talking about a fighting game, the first thing you want to examine are the characters you can select at launch. These characters are going to be the core components of your game and are going to take you throughout that initial competitive run, and you want to know, gee, what is there to offer? Well, Street Fighter V offers 16 characters from the get-go, an interesting mix of classic characters who return from the series like Ryu and Chun-Li, some returning characters from previous iterations of games that maybe haven't been seen for quite a while, such as Birdie, and even some new characters to throw in there for variety and to have some kind of a new experience, such as Nikali and Rashid. So there is a good mix of old, new, and returning characters in Street Fighter V, although admittedly as they were announcing the cast selection for this iteration, I was like, it really seems they're just picking every character that has not been in Street Fighter for a long time, but I digress, it's still a good variety. You're going to have your zoned combat with ranged projectiles, you're going to have up-close grapplers with like Zangief, you're going to have teleporting characters, you're going to have all kinds of different gameplay elements here that is going to give you a wide variety of gameplay styles, so no matter what kind of a fighting game player you are, you're probably going to be able to find a character who is part of your forte, and you're going to be able to focus in on a certain kind of gameplay from the initial get-go, and that's a good thing. I've played a lot of these games where unfortunately only one kind of character really dominates. After playing this game for at least a week, I can tell you there's going to be enough variety, at least in the initial few months of gameplay, that you can play with any character and at least get some enjoyment out of it. Maybe with Zangief being the exception because he really doesn't have many tools against ranged characters at this point, but I digress. The cast is varied, the cast is interesting, and there's enough characters that you'll get bang for your buck when it comes down to playing with each of them in a different way. Now, in addition to the launch roster of 16 fighters, there's also going to be a series of DLC characters released over the course of 2016. They can be obtained for free, or you could buy a season pass for $30 and get them all initially. The way this is supposedly going to work is you can earn in-game fight money to unlock each of these DLC characters without spending a dime. The issue here being each character is supposedly going to cost 100,000 fight points. Now, you can earn fight points through various methods, such as defeating the survivor mode on different levels of difficulty, or completing the story mode for each character. Beating the story mode of the game will earn you about 100,000 total fight points, which means you can get one character for free. Survival mode will earn you various different points depending on what difficulty levels you complete it. But essentially, the core gameplay of the game is going to be online play, which you only earn around 50 fight points per fight. So just do the math. 100,000 fight points divided by 50, it's going to take you quite a lot of matches in order to earn each character. For most people, unless you're constantly playing the game online, this free-to-earn model may not work. And I get the feeling that many people may find themselves buying the characters or the season pass down the line who initially thought that this free model was going to work for them. I'm probably one of those people because I certainly don't have enough time to be playing thousands of online matches just to earn enough points to get these characters for free. So really dependent on your skill level, dependent on your amount of free time and how much time you want to dedicate to the game, this free-to-get model for DLC characters may or may not work for you. Once again, Street Fighter V does some unique things with the gameplay system that mixes it up. You've got a V-skill available, which is a new ability for each and every character that is individualized for that person's playstyle. Some of these abilities will allow you to absorb projectiles, for example, while others will allow you to maneuver around the screen or have some kind of unique special move. Every character's V-skill is different, and ultimately I'm sure people will find out which ones are much better than others in the long run, but it is kind of fun that every character has their own unique kind of thing, while in Street Fighter IV, everyone had the same kind of deal when it came to the focus attacks and the dash canceling. In this game, everyone's a little different, and that's a cool thing. That same thing carries over to the other new system, the V trigger system, by which you have a V meter that builds up during the course of the match, and once it is filled, everyone has some kind of a unique ability. For example, some characters can blow through projectiles with a huge combo style move, while others will get temporary buffs to speed and damage. So again, every character unique, every character different, makes it feel a lot different than Street Fighter 4, where it was more kind of generic, and it ended up being more about what characters simply had higher priority with their special moves in Street Fighter 4, because everyone had the same focus attacks and dash cancels. In Street Fighter 5, it's a lot more individualized per the fighter that you select. Another new addition to the gameplay engine is the crush counter system, by which each character has 1 or 2 normal attacks, which if timed correctly will hit a counter hit on your opponent, causing their body to crumple and leaving them wide open for a follow-up attack. Now every character is different. Some people will have like standing heavy attacks that are way more maneuverable than others. Some people's crush counters are way safer than others, and again, really adds to the uniqueness of the game engine, where it's not everyone has a generic tactic, but everyone has kind of a unique take on this system. Crush counters are cool, and ultimately I'm sure people again are going to find some really abusable ones in the long term. Only having the game out released for a week, it's very hard to say in competitive play how these will essentially pan out, but for now the system feels unique and different, and a lot different than the gameplay of Street Fighter 4, which is a good thing. The graphics of Street Fighter 5 are also kind of interesting, because they took the more cartoony look of Street Fighter 4 and definitely seemed to try to make it look at least a little bit more realistic. Ooh, some of the female characters are pretty sexualized, which I'm very surprised, considering the fact that there's been so much issue with SJWs and all kinds of criticism. I mean, Capcom even removed the ass slap animation for Armika, only to find out in the final game there's a ton of outfits for some of these characters where their boobs are hanging out, and it's pretty crazy. But I digress. The character models for Street Fighter 5 look a lot better, a lot more detailed than they were in Street Fighter 4, and no surprise here, because obviously the technology has advanced since 7 years ago. However, it needs to be said that the background animations for this game are kind of peculiar, with frame rates dipping down into sometimes the teens, and some of these characters in the background that normally would just kind of be periphery things almost becoming distractions when you notice that they're chugging along. And I have to say, I don't think that the backgrounds were kind of a focus for the game developers here. I think they were really focusing in on the fighters in the foreground, which is fine, but still, for a game that's supposed to be a AAA release from a big-time game dev, it's bizarre to see some of these backgrounds kind of chug along and not certainly be as high quality as the characters in the foreground. It's a little bizarre. Now let's talk about ultimately what has been the polarizing, controversial topic when it comes to Street Fighter V, the amount of game modes and content available during launch. Whether you are a casual or a competitive level Street Fighter player is going to be a critical part of your decision of whether or not you want to play this game right now. And so let me break it down for you, because I really feel that it's essential to examine this game from 2 different sides. First, let's talk about the competitive standpoint. If you're the kind of person who wants to play the living hell out of Street Fighter V, you want to become a pro-level player and attend tournaments, this game was pretty much catered for you. From the get-go, you've got a training mode that has far more options in it than ever before when it comes to customization of what you want the AI to do. You've got many kind of options right from the get-go that really allow this to be a robust mode where you can try to learn game essentials if you have tons of time to put into it, to just sit there and test, gee, does this move beat this move? Does the timing of this meaty beat this? And really, essentially, it's almost like a train yourself kind of deal when it comes to the game. The online gameplay component is also pretty good, with consistent matches of netcode that I have to admit is better than Street Fighter 4's. I know a lot of people wanted to know my opinion on the online connectivity of Street Fighter V. The bottom line is, yes, overall on launch week, the experience I had with most online matches in Street Fighter V were far better than the overall experience that I had with the years of Street Fighter 4. It seems that this rollback style netcode that they have implemented, for the most part, is working, and although maybe 1 out of 10 matches you'll get a frustrating one where you see things jumping around or you strike your opponent, then the game takes it back, for the most part, It's a lot better. You don't get any of those slow motion matches, any of those matches where you do a move and it's literally 2 seconds later that things happen on the screen. And this kind of online environment is one in which you are going to learn a lot better for a competitive style of gameplay than that one from Street Fighter 4 was. So ultimately, if you are a competitive player, yeah, you're going to like Street Fighter V because of the robust training mode and because of the fact that the online gameplay is essentially a lot better than Street Fighter 4's was. But let's face it, if you are a competitive Street Fighter player who's addicted to the Street Fighter series, you're probably going to buy Street Fighter V anyway. So what is there to offer in Street Fighter V for the more casual audience? Those who maybe won't be jumping online at every moment's notice to play other people, but maybe want to enjoy the game in a more single-player setting. This is where we begin to run into the major problems with this game. From everything that I've seen this week, this game was designed for the hardcore competitive audience, period. And I hate to say that, but it's pretty apparent who this game is being aimed for, and it's not the non-competitive player. At launch, the game only has 3 offline modes available: Story, Survival, and Training. Now, training mode is nice to mess around and maybe learn a combo or two, but if you're not going to sit there for hours on end programming the AI dummy with setups, you probably don't care about that. You want to know what else is available. Well, you've got a story mode where each of the 16 characters will play a series of anywhere from 2 to 4 one-round matches against almost insanely stupid computer AI that will never press a button and barely block. I mean, it's laughably easy how easy the fights are in the story mode. In addition, the cutscenes in story mode are all just single frames of hand-drawn art. There's no actual cutscenes that are rendered here, and everything in story mode screams kind of last minute, slapped together, almost no effort put into it. And this mode is actually being strongly criticized and laughed at by most people who play the game, saying, what happened here? This is not a formal story. And compared to other fighting games that have been released recently, like Mortal Kombat 10 just last year, the lack of a proper story mode is a huge thing that's missing at launch. The only other offline mode available is Survival mode. What you do is select a character of your choice and a difficulty of your choice, and then you're going to fight a gauntlet of AI-controlled enemies in single-round fights. Now, the difficulty of these fights depends on the difficulty that you chose initially, and also the length of the survival mode also depends on the difficulty. For example, if you select normal, you're going to enter into a gauntlet of 30 fights, which about the first 10 to 15, almost AI non-existent. Then finally it'll start to ramp up, and then by the end, the final 2 fights, the AI gets so crazy it actually reads your button inputs and will react directly to what you're doing, which actually has caused a lot of controversy around the internet with people saying, I just spent 20 to 40 minutes going through survival mode, blew through it just to get to the final guy, M. Bison, who reads every button input I do and easily defeated me. What gives, Capcom? But I digress. Yes, the difficulty will actually increase over the course of the rounds. Now, the interesting thing here is that at the end of each round, you get an option to purchase some kind of an upgrade based off of the amount of points that you earned during that round. So, for example, you could buy a defensive upgrade. That means in the next fight, you'll have higher defense and take less damage. Perhaps you could buy a health regeneration, so if you lost a lot of health in that single fight, you can get it back for the next fight. And, of course, the most interesting one of all is the doubler feature, which is always available, but is a different selection for each fight. Some doublers make it so that you don't build up your super bar or V-skill bar during a fight, but you'll earn double points. Others make it so that if you literally get touched by any attack, you will dizzy. So that's kind of a unique one, but again, you'll get double or triple points. And of course, some of them are ridiculously overpowered, in which, oh, you have 0 health, so if you get hit once, the whole thing's over. That one's pretty risky, and I wouldn't recommend that one for anyone. But the fact that between rounds you get these options to select different things, and that depending on, gee, am I coming into a harder fight, am I coming into an easier fight, so I can maybe do a double down and try to earn more points, it really is an interesting strategy. And by the end of survival mode, if you do complete it, you will earn not only tons of fight points, you'll also earn new colors for your character, as well as some, some cool unlockables, such as a new title for your character as well. So ultimately, if you do tough it out and get through survival mode, that's a great thing. You're going to unlock a ton of stuff. But the question is, for the person who bought this game just for offline play, do you really want to go through 30 to 50 to as upwards of 100 of these single round fights just for the sake of unlocking colors and titles and a few fight points for your character? It really is a repetitive grind. And when you look at this content and you say, so either I play a story that's incredibly short and just smashed together and not very interesting for each character, do I do training mode, which is just training mode, there's nothing to it, or do I play survival mode, which is just repetitive fights? What exactly am I supposed to be going for in the offline content of this game? And in fact, it absolutely needs to be called out in this review that the offline content of Street Fighter V is a huge step back from what was available in just the last iteration of Street Fighter IV. There's no arcade mode to speak of, which is the traditional and classic mode that's present in almost every single fighting game ever, and why they chose to not put an arcade mode into this game, I have absolutely no clue, because it would have been a no-brainer and easy thing to do, and it's not there. In addition, there's no challenges. I mean, the trials/challenges have been a huge part of Capcom fighting games in the last console generation, where you try to do these really difficult combos, and it could take a long time, but it also could allow you to actually master the timing of your character. Again, not present at launch, and the fact that there's just nothing else to do besides a really quick story mode and a highly repetitive, annoying survival mode begs the question: should you buy this game if you're not going to play it at a competitive capacity? And I think the internet at least has come to a pretty strong consensus at this point. No. Street Fighter V has almost nothing to offer for those who will not be playing this constantly against other humans. So that pretty much says it all. I mean, this game was 100% developed for the competitive player, and if you're not a competitive player, at least right now at launch, there's almost nothing to offer you. But to be fair, let's talk long-term strategy, because Capcom has come out and said, no, listen, we understand that this is a very kind of bare-bones game at launch. However, we are going to be releasing free DLCs all year, and all these new modes are coming out. For example, supposedly in March, there's supposed to be a challenge mode that's actually released for the game. There's also supposed to be some kind of a boss rush mode where you'll be fighting AI-controlled opponents that aren't necessarily characters from the game, but maybe like more nerfed versions of them, that if you defeat them, you'll be earning fight points and titles and such. And apparently coming out much later this year will be a full-fledged story mode that will span a couple hours in length and is supposed to tell the full narrative of Street Fighter V. Why these features weren't included in the actual retail release of the game baffles the mind, but those who have done research have pretty much also come to a consensus. It's because they wanted this game available to the competitive players as soon as possible. The competitive players are chomping at the bit for a new game because Street Fighter IV is incredibly old and most people have moved on from it. The Capcom Cup competitive tournament circuit needs to have this game available ASAP so they can start having qualifiers for EVO. So they literally rushed this game to market bare bones so that at least the competitive aspect was there so they could hold it in tournaments, and pretty much didn't give a crap that the common person who bought the game wouldn't care about that, and just released it as is. Now, you can make do with what you want there, and you can decide for yourself if you think you could trust Capcom to actually release all the content that they're promising over the next few months. But the bottom line is, at launch, this game is only geared towards the competitive, and if you're not a competitive player, you're probably going to want to skip it. So let's talk positives and negatives. Positives of Street Fighter V is that the game engine is very much revamped from Street Fighter IV. It's got a lot of uniqueness to it, it definitely feels fresh, and the gameplay is pretty solid. In addition, the initial cast of 16 characters are well varied. There's not one character that was overwhelmingly seeming dominant over anyone else in the initial launch week, and I do think that there is enough here to actually add to a long variety of gameplay in at least the next few months so that people don't get bored of the game right away. When it comes to the graphical design of Street Fighter V, I definitely like where they're going with this. They tried to make it a lot more realistic than Street Fighter IV was. The character models are a lot more detailed and less cartoony. The frame rate is pretty consistent during combat, and so graphically I have to give a thumbs up to at least the characters in the foreground of Street Fighter V. They look and move great. Also, for the competitive player, this game has a lot of awesome features, including a well redesigned training mode that's way more robust than those in previous Street Fighter games, and online gameplay with much better netcode than Street Fighter 4, so if you're a competitive player, this is probably going to be your cup of tea. But now for the negatives, and I've got a lot to say here, so prepare yourself. First of all, the lack of traditional offline game modes that have been present in Street Fighter for the past 20 years is completely unacceptable. I don't care about the Capcom Cup competitive circuit. There is no excuse to release a $60 retail game in this day and age and have bare bones features with the promise of giving them later. You know, Splatoon tried to do this last year for Nintendo, and at least Nintendo did follow up on that and did provide tons of content. Do we believe Capcom as much as we believe Nintendo? I don't know. And the bottom line is, for the casual player who doesn't care about the competitive aspect of the game, there's nothing really here for you, and I feel bad for anyone who rushed out to buy the game just to find out that these offline features are bare bones. It's unacceptable, it's disgraceful, it's disrespectful, and it pretty much is disappointing for those of us who've been such longtime fans of the Street Fighter franchise. The next negative is actually very much affecting everyone playing the game, whether you're a casual or you're a competitive player. The online matchmaking of Street Fighter V is incredibly inconsistent. Here's what I mean. Sometimes you'll log on and try to play a game, and you'll get one within a minute. It'll be a great connection, and you'll be like, wow, that was awesome. Then another time of the day, you'll try to go play, and you'll be sitting there for 10-15 minutes before the game finally finds a compatible match, starts the match, and that's if the match even works. Sometimes it'll just drop out of nowhere. The game is still suffering from constant server disconnects, which, by the way, will kick you out of a survival mode run. So just imagine investing 30 minutes to an hour into a survival mode run. You're near the end. Oh, server disconnect, and now it resets you, and you've completely wasted all of that time. Incredibly frustrating. Why Capcom cannot get the servers for this game to be more consistent? Why it can't find matches way more easily, as in every single other fighting game they've ever released before? I have absolutely no idea, and they've been completely tight-lipped about the whole subject, almost like they have a totally new group of people working on this game who don't even know what the work was of the previous dev teams who made previous fighting games, and they're just not going to say anything. They're just going to keep saying, oh, we'll get it to work, and then all of a sudden it crashes again, and they rush in a panic fury to try to get it working again, and it's a joke. I mean, it's a fighting game. The whole sales point of a fighting game is that at any time you can jump in and fight against people all over the world, and if you can't get that experience, what's the point of buying a fighting game? Right now with Street Fighter V, it's incredibly inconsistent as to if or when you'll ever be able to get a match. Like I said, you might be able to get one from the get-go, you might never find one, and it all depends on how Capcom servers are feeling. So, in that regard, incredibly inconsistent and really annoying. In fact, it needs to be said that right now, this very moment that I'm recording this review, I'm unable to play Street Fighter V online, even though I originally had planned to do so during this time period. Why? Because Capcom is doing server maintenance in the middle of the day, which is actually a prime time for Americans to be playing this game online. Now, can you tell me, I challenge you to tell me, another fighting game, AAA game released in the past decade, which did server maintenance in the middle of the day and did not allow people to play their game during launch week. I mean, it's unheard of. I mean, when you think server maintenance, you think MMOs, you think games that have hundreds to thousands of players on them, not games where it's a one-on-one matchup. And the fact that they have to do necessary server maintenance within launch week of a major fighting game tells me they're doing something wrong. They have an essential design component of their matchmaking server system that is not good enough for a game like this. Ultimately, what do I think of Street Fighter V? When it comes to the essentials of the game from a competitive side, I could tell you I think the game is pretty good, and although that could change in the long term, especially with these games, different strategies and things that are found out within the first few months, and there might be something super abusable that's discovered, for the most part, Street Fighter V feels like a solid fighting game from the get-go with a wide variety of gameplay, a lot of fun when it comes to the cast and the design of the characters, and ultimately, if you're a longtime fan of Street Fighter, and you're planning on playing this game competitively, this is going to be a good buy. But if you're not, if you don't want to play against other humans and you're looking for a robust experience similar to what NetherRealm has put out in the past kind of years, and also, hell, Street Fighter 4, you're not going to find it here, at least not at launch. which makes it difficult for me to actually review the game now because it is an incomplete game that you're going to buy for $60. If you're not going to be initially playing Street Fighter V competitively from the get-go, I cannot recommend a purchase. My best advice for you is to wait and see. Will Capcom actually live up to their promises in the next few months and release all of the stuff that they claim they're going to put into the game and make it a more complete experience? If they do, then maybe buy it at a later date. But then no way can I recommend buying this game unless you're going to be sitting there playing against people online and playing against your friends locally, especially if you're going to be practicing for tournaments. Then maybe you'll want it. But outside of that, I just simply cannot recommend a purchase of this game. And so ultimately, when it comes to my score for Street Fighter V, I have to base it off of what's available now. I can't say, oh, well, they may do this, or they may fix the servers, or they may give you this game mode in the future. I have to review it based off of what is available at launch, which is sad because I love Street Fighter, but I have to be honest. Now, what I'm going to do is give you a review score as of right now, and then in several months' time, let's say maybe May or June, when supposedly all the game modes have finally been released for Street Fighter V, I'm going to re-examine the game and give you an updated opinion on it, similar to what I did with Splatoon last year. But for now, at launch, with the features available, with the issues with the online connectivity, the best possible score I could give Street Fighter V is a 6 out of 10. And let me tell you, I actually have a hard time giving it a 6 out of 10. The only reason I'm giving it a 6 out of 10 is because I do feel that the core gameplay mechanics are great. They're well developed. V-skills and V-trigger are a lot better in my opinion than the focus attacks and dash cancels that were present in Street Fighter 4. And I think ultimately this game engine can succeed with the crush counters and such, and I really like the feel of the game. That's the only reason I'm even giving it that high of a score, because the bottom line is, with the no content of offline players that's available here at launch, the fact the online matchmaking barely works, the server maintenance, the troubles they're having, this game does not deserve your hard-earned dollar unless you're a competitive player. 6 out of 10 for Street Fighter V, at least at launch, but I will be giving it an amended score later in the year. Well, that's it for the Hateful Truth review of Street Fighter V. I hope you enjoyed it, and now you know whether or not you want to get that game for yourself at this point. If you want to see a lot more gameplay from the game, head over to my YouTube channel, DSP Gaming, where I recorded this game all week long, including matchups, story mode, survival, and everything, so you can see for yourself what exactly it has to offer. In addition, if you did enjoy this review, I hope you'll check out the description of the video where you can find our Amazon Associates link, as well as a link to our Patreon at patreon.com/DarksidePhil. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you next time on the Hateful Truth.